Welcome back to the Jessica Ash Wellness YouTube channel, coming to you with another episode of the Fully Nourished Podcast, a place to explore where female physiology and feminine energy dance together to shape our life experience. I'm Jessica Ash, a functional nutritionist and integrative health coach. And in this podcast, you'll notice that it's really about taking both a scientific and a spiritual look at why we as women have become so completely burned out, almost at a soul level, and the real physiological consequences to that burnout. I want to explore together what it looks like to reclaim our feminine radiance and become deeply and fully nourished. With that being said, as a reminder, everything in this podcast is for education and inspiration only and is not intended as medical advice. Please talk to the appropriate professionals when necessary, and please use common sense before making any changes to your diet or lifestyle. Let's have a good skincare chat, because I wish everyone found you before they found anything else. That's what I really wanted to say. Like the summary of, if everyone could just find Sara before they find anyone else, then it would really save them a lot of money, but also a lot of
Yes,
pain.
I know. Thank you so much for that. And the same to you. I mean, I had a client recently who told me, I found you on Instagram years ago, but at that point, I just wasn't ready to receive your message. And my
Mm,
message is essentially useless stuff on your face.
mm.
Like that's the essence. And I think it's very enticing, especially when you're young, to be this like skincare enthusiast and you're very enticed by all the skincare products and ingredients and all the potential benefits. And then my message is think about your skin health, don't overwhelm your skin, don't use too much skincare, let your skin heal. Your skin has amazing capability to heal itself. And I think you have to be ready to receive that message.
Mm.
I think you have to have a certain level of like maturity or, made like enough mistakes, to arrive at that point.
Yeah, because it isn't as sexy of a message, I guess. And I feel
No,
like
no, it's
we're
not.
we're kind of similar in the way where like nourishment is not always sexy, and
Yeah.
kind of playing the long game and supporting your health long term is not always the sexiest approach or the most fun. I guess it is kind of fun to like shop skincare and just shop all these products and these fancy things and read reviews, and people are like, "Oh my gosh, this changed my skin forever." And but not really understand the why behind it or have any type of lens of how you're viewing skin through. If you're just like, I just want my skin to look good, it's very different than I want my skin to be healthy so that it's resilient. That's at least how
Yes.
I kind of see it.
Yes, exactly. So I understand, especially when you are dealing with a very visible skin issue, you just want something that's going to fix it very quickly. So it is very enticing to think, oh, the only reason I haven't fixed it yet is because I haven't found that magical product, right?
Mm,
You just kind of like, it's very, very alluring. Whereas changing your daily habits and actually thinking, oh, the reason that I still don't have beautiful skin is because maybe some of my daily habits are just messing up with my progress. That's much more difficult to face, right? It's much more difficult to change. And
mm,
so obviously a certain level of maturity, is necessary to actually, like really be honest with yourself. And
yeah.
it took me many years. I was for a very long time at a place where I was just trying to find some sort of holy grail product, trying one thing after another, trying for a quick fix, and it never really lasts, so as you
Yeah.
know very well.
Yeah. It's funny because you do see so many people talking about these holy grail products. And I feel like with the explosion of TikTok, you have this extra added layer of just everyone's trying everything. So I guess we could rewind a little bit. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about your skincare journey personally, and then how you've like arrived to this place where you're helping so many women. I mean, you've helped so many women heal their skin and their skin barrier. And I feel like I want to shout it from the rooftops. I always recommend anybody that asks about skin to you,
Oh,
because
thank
you
you.
you are so capable of just kind of filtering things down into a very simple approach. And it's really no BS. I even just recently read your skincare barrier fix book because I just wanted to kind of
Oh,
brush up.
thank you
I
so
always
much.
learn so much from it, and gosh, so much content in there for really free. I was able to just download it on Kindle, and I was just like, oh my gosh, there's just so much hear that is not always talked about. So how have you become this skincare magician?
Oh, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate the support. It really means a lot. It's been a very long process. I also was somebody who's, were struggling with acne for many years. It's like your typical acne story. It starts somewhere around, early teenage years. I was around 14 when my acne started. And I had like periods where it was okay. It was just kind of like this comedonal acne. Sometimes it was like very cystic and very painful. My skin would go up and down. And I tried, everything under the sun, just like your, usual, person with acne. They go to a dermatologist. You do several rounds of like oral antibiotics, topical antibiotics, like all this stuff. And so results never really last. So as you kind of like move into late teenage years, I remember I was kind of like at that point really experimenting much more with my skincare. And nowadays for teenagers, I cannot even imagine how much worse it must be with TikTok and like everything that they're bombarding us with. I think it's much worse growing up with that surrounding you than when I was a teenager, when there wasn't really social media. So yes, you could Google things and you could kind of like listen to your dermatologist, your esthetician, and it was like a lot of information to take in. But now it's like on a different level. So I can see where a lot of confusion and just like so much noise is coming from. Again, it must be very, very difficult to resist also all of that. So yeah, TikTok era is something else. But I think it's also my story kind of like continues into, ultimately being put on hormonal birth control, which is also something I know a lot of women can relate to, and where we didn't really know and realize or were informed just how many side effects would, impact, kind of like occur over the years. And it will kind of like get worse and worse, especially, going to college and like with the college stress, maybe not eating that well. So my skin was really at its worst, I would say like my early 20s. And at that point, I was like, just my skin was so tired of skincare. Like I could kind of start to realize that. And I was like, just told to myself, why don't I just stop trusting blindly people around me, all the endless dermatologists I was visiting, estheticians, the treatments, whatever, and just kind of like learn for myself about the skin. So that was kind of like the beginning of my enlightenment, so to speak, because what I started learning, reading through dermatology sources, learning about for the first time ever about the skin barrier and skin health, I was absolutely horrified at my skincare practices up to that point, because I realized just how much I was damaging my skin, how much worse I was making the situation with my skincare. Again, I was absolutely horrified. And so I was also like mind blown at how I've never heard words like skin barrier or skin health. I mean, skin barrier is a very established, term or concept in dermatology. We know so much about the structure of the skin, uppermost layers of the skin, the maturation of skin cells and everything. And still none of the, especially nowadays in TikTok and like, people don't really understand that concept that well. And I really dedicated many years to that, and also kind of try to observe people in the real world, my clients, my students, kind of like what really works, like how does the skincare really interact with the skin barrier. So my own journey, just to conclude, I hold bachelor and master in molecular biology. So I was very much trained to kind of like look into the details, always kind of like think critically. And so I started to really apply that to my skincare. Like I was wondering, like, why didn't I do this before? But anyways, I started to kind of like question everything that I was told at that point. Oh, you have to cleanse morning and evening. You have to use a moisturizer. You have to exfoliate. You have to this. You have to that. I was like, why? Who said that? Like, why would that be true? So I really started to question everything. And I arrived at like a very, very simple routine. After a while, I kind of just allow my skin to heal itself. It took me about a year. Like at that point, I think this was like 2012 to 13, when the last of my acne kind of started to really disappear. I would say, and we will probably get to that, some of the topical like face oils were helpful to me, to correct the linoleic acid deficiency. What was most likely my kind of final problem. And so I would say, since I was somebody who has always been pretty healthy, I did have a lot of, let's say, quote unquote, internal issues, which, we can also cover because of, hormonal birth control history, antibiotics history, and all of that. I had really quite extreme, I would say, estrogen dominance issues for a while. And so this was definitely contributing to my acne. But I also started to, or we're always kind of like eating healthy. I was always conscious of that. So I think for me, the biggest piece of the puzzle really was that topical care and just removing the irritation that I was inflicting about my skin for so many years, and just like finally allow my skin to heal. So I've learned a lot through that process. I started Healthy Skin Glow's blog a few years later, and that kind of like turned into just like more and more, reach to people. People started, reaching out to me. I started to kind of like observe, okay, what actually worked for other people? Did they have the same experience as I did? And that really kind of accumulated a lot of my knowledge. I could observe a lot of patterns. So this is where kind of like a lot of my advice is coming from, just observing people over so many years, not just my own experience.
Yeah, well, which is, I feel like, the most powerful way to learn, because
Yes.
we can know things on paper, and we
Yes.
have our own experience, and of course our experience gives us a little bias. But when you start to see these patterns, especially when you're working with women who are so sensitive and kind of aware of what's, like, a lot of times they're already kind of noticing patterns, or they're very much experimenting and trying different things, it can be very helpful to get that data, because that's really what it is data. So
Yes.
it's just, it's really powerful. So I guess before we dive into some of the biggest mistakes when it comes to the skin barrier, can you just explain, in, I guess, simpler terms, if someone doesn't really know at all, what is the skin barrier? How is it supposed to function?
Yes. So that is basically the uppermost layer of our skin, the one that you can touch, structurally called stratum corneum. And it's kind of, in dermatology, the analogy is to like a brick wall where the bricks are skin cells, corneocytes. We usually refer to them as dead skin cells. I mean, they may be dead, but there's still a lot of activity going on in the uppermost layers. So those will be kind of like the bricks, and then they are held together by the mortar or glue, which are various lipid molecules, right? And this structure has to be very cohesive and very robust in order to perform its function. And functions are many, from preventing too much water loss from within the skin, keeping your skin moisturized, but also preventing your entire body from becoming dehydrated. Also prevents entry of a lot of pollutants, toxins, pathogens into the deeper layers of our skin and the bloodstream. So it performs a very, very essential function. Skin, there's so much enzymatic activity in this uppermost layer of the skin, and we are oftentimes disturbing normal skin processes by, let's say, using too much skincare, again, over exfoliating, over cleansing, very hot water, things like that. So the skin doesn't really like to be interfered with a lot, because there is so much of that enzymatic activity, and just like the skin just needs to be left alone to function, to perform all of these important processes. And this is something where I think I'm trying to kind of like put more into the conversation about the skin, not just like various skincare ingredients and their benefits, but also like, what does our skin actually need to function optimally?
Right, because I guess in a perfect, healthy, balanced world, the skin would almost be this self-regulating organ.
Yes.
Like you don't sit there and try to, mess with your heart or your liver all the
Yes.
time, or like rub things all over these organs. But we've kind of forgotten that the skin is an organ. So I think of functions like, for example, like exfoliation or its own hydration. Those are things that it when it's healthy, it should actually be able to do on its own. Is that
Correct.
true?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, that is true.
Wow.
So when I say this, people usually are just shocked. My clients are just like, "What are you even saying?" And then I ask them, because usually these are women who are married, and then I ask them, "Does your husband use any skincare?" And the answer is always no.
Mhm.
What is his skin like? Oh, it's perfect. Every single time, like 10 out of 10 times, this answer is the same. And then they say, like, oh, I just don't understand it. I was like, because his skin is able to completely maintain itself. So I'm not saying that we need zero skincare in every and any situation, but the skin, healthy skin, is indeed capable of cleansing and exfoliating and maintaining itself. So there's a natural process called desquamation, where these dead skin cells or corneocytes are just shedding off continuously off the surface of our skin in, like, timely manner, continuously. And so when this process is disrupted via various pathways, this is when we run into trouble and can get acne, skin texture, comedones, etc. So this is actually kind of how acne starts in essence. But it's funny because people usually are very shocked to hear that. But then how did we exist for so many, like millennia without any skincare? Our skin was, fine. And also so many people today who don't use anything except water, their skin is usually like the best you have ever seen. So like we have to ask ourselves why. And I've asked myself this for, a long time. So
yeah, it definitely poses the question of what's going on. So in your work, what are the biggest factors that are driving acne? Because I'm seeing that there's a breakdown in the skin barrier and how the skin is functioning. So what are the patterns that you're seeing the most?
I would say my typical client is somebody who is already very conscious about nutrition and, healthy diet, healthy lifestyle, but their skin is still very much acne prone. So they're still not seeing any progress even after they have corrected a lot of their health markers. So the skin is very peculiar here because it will respond to a lot of different stimuli. So for a lot of women that I see, actually their history of certain, medications like antibiotics, hormonal birth control, like in my case, combine that with maybe restrictive eating, fat diets, excessive chronic stress in their lives. So stressors would be a big trigger for our skin because they impact our hormones, and hormones will obviously impact our skin. So those would be the internal triggers. And the thing with the skin is that they don't have to be present for a very long time. You literally just would need to have like a bout of, let's say a stressful year during college years or something. And then you just continue to have very irritating skincare practices. And then you're just continuing that inflammation in your skin barrier. You're continuing to have acne, even though, let's say, initial trigger, something stressful, let's say, restrictive eating is been like corrected, right? Like, so they have healed internally, but your acne is still continuing because of the irritating practices that are just perpetuating the inflammation in the skin barrier. And acne at its core is really inflammatory skin condition. So I would say this is the picture that I see almost on a daily basis with my clients. And so this happens because they really were not aware of all the ways that they were irritating their skin barrier topically with like even the best products out there. So usually people are very obsessed with like finding the best products, but that is really just one tiny part of the picture or like a puzzle of having optimal skincare routine. Like we have to understand what really is adequate for our skin at that moment in time. So this is much more challenging than just like finding the best product that has the best reviews online.
So what are some of those mistakes that you feel are keeping acne going, even if they're writing these internal issues? Because I do feel like the skin's kind of the last thing to heal, but
Yes, it is.
also if you're constantly irritating it or constantly inflaming it, it's
It's
not
not going to
going
help.
to.
Yes, exactly. So I would say definitely overuse of skincare. So, for example, the way people view skincare, and especially people sometimes reach out to me and tell me, like, oh, but I've heard about all the ingredients that you talk about. I was like, okay, but you probably heard and have tried to think about it in this way. You think, okay, this exfoliant like salicylic acid or mandelic acid is going to exfoliate my skin and make my skin smoother. Okay, I'm going to use that. Then vitamin C is going to make my skin brighter. I'm going to use that. Then a retinol is going to, help me with anti-aging. I'm going to use that. And then like on and on it goes. But then when you combine it together into one routine and you're using all these active ingredients, it's simply too overwhelming for the skin barrier because you're applying hundreds of different ingredients. You're applying the active ingredients, which do introduce certain level of irritation, which then basically equals inflammation. So our skin needs to be able to recover from that momentary irritation in order to basically reap benefits. So let's say using a vitamin C serum, there is definitely always irritation that you introduce with using such a product, but then your skin recovers overnight and your skin is like all nice and glowing the day after. Okay, but if you do too much, if you're using several different actives, you're using a 10-step skincare routine, you're really just getting the side effects, not any sort of benefits from that skincare. So this is very, very common, especially in today's era of TikTok and 10-step skincare routines, and people just really being focused on the benefits that they can receive from their skincare products and different skincare ingredients without understanding how this actually impacts the skin barrier when you combine it together into a routine. So what's really ironic about this is that if they were to just pick a single active ingredient to use instead of 5 different ones, they would actually have better results because it wouldn't be so overwhelming for the skin barrier. So this is a very, very common problem that I see. Another problem is people maybe, especially I guess my sample of people is a bit biased because they're, again, already a bit conscious about using non-toxic, skincare and toxic ingredients. And so a lot of them come to me using certain natural skincare that just didn't vibe with their skin. And they really tried very hard to use it, to implement it. And that can be face oils to tallow, to shea butter, to certain butters, essential oils. And all these things can be very inflammatory for a lot of people with sensitive acne-prone skin. Not to say they cannot, work for a lot of other people. I've definitely seen them work, but they can also be pretty problematic for a lot of people that I've seen that I work with.
I've definitely seen an uptick in people using tallow-based skincare. It's just something that I have noticed. And I personally cannot use tallow-based skincare. It just clogs my pores and keeps me pretty irritated. Or it has to be very, not a regular part of my routine, kind of just once in a while thing. And I know there's plenty of people, like you say, it works for because they're screaming it from the rooftops. Once I switched to animal-based skincare, all of my problems went away. But I think there's a lot of women that follow that advice and then are wondering what's wrong with my skin, or this new trend where it's no PUFAs in your skincare because these PUFAs are going to oxidize. Could you dive a little bit more into because you talked about how the skin barrier has these lipids that connect these, it's a part of the living, breathing barrier. What lipids are included in that barrier?
This is a really, really good question. So in these lipids, as a part of the skin barrier, as a part of sebum, we have various lipids, from cholesterol, triglycerides, to ceramides, to free fatty acids. And actually the ratio of these free fatty acids, most of which are, so linoleic acid, or the, infamous omega-6, is the predominant one. Then we also have palmitic acid and oleic acid. And they have to be in a very specific ratio or amount in the sebum in order for the sebum and these skin barrier structure to be functioning. If we have too much of one of them, things can get a bit, too inflamed, it causes this immune response from the skin. And I think this is what happens with tallow for a lot of people when they experience more congestion, more acne, because we know from research that overwhelming the skin with palmitic acid, which tallow is a very rich source of, can actually be really inflammatory because it introduces an imbalance in the ratio of these free fatty acids in our sebum, in our skin barrier. So this is the best, or the mechanism that I think could explain it. I'm not entirely sure that that's what's happening, but based on the research that I've seen, it is pretty conclusive that the process that can start acne, we have a lot of pro-inflammatory signaling molecules included in there, like interleukin-1 alpha beta, interleukin-6, tumor necrosis factor alpha, and they are elevated when we apply palmitic acid to the skin, right? And so if we know that tallow is a very rich source of that, we can conclude, okay, this might have something to do with people experiencing more congestion, more acne, because it causes inflammatory response in some people. Some people have very, very, very good results. This is kind of oh my goodness, this fixed all my issues. And so I think partly because they have probably stopped all the other skincare that was probably irritating them, and and their skin is just dealing better with the tallow. So we have bacteria. Obviously, there's an entire microbiome on our skin composed of various different, strains of bacteria, mites, fungi, etc. And this bacteria has enzymes hydrolases, which break down the fats. And this is continuously, happening with our own lipids, our own, in our own sebum, our own skin barrier, but also the oils and fats that we apply on the skin. And so my guess is that maybe we process them a bit differently because we do have maybe a bit different composition of that microbiome. So maybe this could be why some people respond really well to tallow, whereas it's quite inflammatory for some other people. And the problem is that people are usually very convinced that, okay, as long as I'm using non-toxic natural skincare, it's also acne safe. It is
Mm.
absolutely not. And it takes them a while to realize that, because the way that it usually occurs is that they gradually develop more and more clogged pores, more and more skin texture and congestion. And then at some point, this starts to getting more and more inflamed. And
Mm.
by that point, several months have passed since they started tallow, and then they're really connected to that event. Like they don't really connect that it's the tallow that has caused it. So, like, I know that it takes months oftentimes for the
Right.
congestion to develop. And so they don't really connect the dots. And so by that time, they're just like, oh, maybe it's something in my diet. Let me be even more restricted with my diet. Like, let me, fiddle with my supplements or something else, right? So yeah, this is kind of like not so easy oftentimes to pinpoint that that's the case. And also for a lot of people, they're in this situation where maybe something is like slightly making their acne worse. And so they never really realize that their skincare is a source of that, like more acne basically popping up because it's so
Mm.
subtle. So this is, I think, very, very common situation that I see. Like I'm kind of trained and like I can see it more easily, but for people, it's usually not that obvious.
That's very interesting. That's super interesting because how many times have we had our skin start acting up and just think it's very something that we recently did and not months and months and months ago?
Yes, exactly.
Because you can maybe have some good results at first, right? Especially if you're using a lot of inflammatory skincare. So I can see how maybe you could have a little bit of oh, this is a little better, and then just
Yes.
keep it a part of your routine and not even realize, oh, wow. So I want to rewind a little bit because you said something that could pique my interest of, many people are using skincare and like layering in these 10-step routines instead of, I'm getting from you that you more adapt your skincare to what your skin is needing at that point. So,
Exactly.
do you recommend more kind of intuitive skincare where you're watching the skin and kind of sitting with the skin and adding in the ingredients that are needed as necessary? Like, how do you approach that?
Yes, exactly. So the skincare routine doesn't have to be super rigid. And actually, with each client, I kind of like to give them a few options. Let's say for morning skincare, okay, maybe try a gentle cleanser or try just, let's say, a honey mask or like a toner cleanse or something gentle. Like, let us observe your skin over the course of a few weeks and see how your skin is responding. Is it maybe more moisturized? Is it maybe getting more clogged if you don't use a cleanser? Like, we always kind of like trying to see where the skin is at and how the skin is responding to different skincare interventions, because it's ultimately only by this like small experimentation that you can arrive at your unique optimized skincare routine. But yeah, it doesn't have to be super rigid. I think it's the main tenet, I would say, is the simplicity.
Mm.
It's the simplicity that really allows the skin the space and time to heal itself. It was interesting, recently I've seen a person I follow on Instagram. She showed a screenshot of basically her non-toxic makeup that she's been using for a while, and then she stopped it. And then she said how much healthier her skin started to look after like a few months, because she
Mm.
was like, oh, I thought this was like absolutely fine, this is all non toxic, but then when I looked at all the ingredients, this is like over 100 ingredients that I was applying to
Ooh.
my skin on a daily basis. So yes, they're all like level 1 or 2 on IVG, but like, it was still impacting my skin barrier, and it was damaging and irritating my skin barrier at a lower level, where I
Mm.
didn't have acne or a rash or anything extreme like that, but like my skin wasn't as glowy and as healthy as it is right now, when I just
Mm.
don't really irritate it with anything. And that was like so spot on. Like that's exactly what I'm trying, like the message I'm trying to get across.
Wow. Do you notice that sometimes when people switch over, like in this girl's case, she stopped her foundation, or people are coming off of these like 10-step skincare routines, is there a period where the skin does get a little bit worse, or like what does that transition look like? Because I know that's usually people's fear, is they're trying to do anything they can to just keep it calmed down, and if anything starts to pop up they get scared and they want to go back or say like this isn't working. Like what does that transition look like, just so people understand?
This is an excellent question. And it's actually what I'm trying to answer within my entire course, the skin rebalancing protocol. So this entire course was made because I tried to answer that exact question. Like, how do I actually transition into a simpler, more natural skincare without my acne exploding? Because a lot of people who are my students, they come from very extensive routine, very harsh routines that were keeping their acne in check to an extent, right? And they don't want to for their acne to explode again. So the problem is that even if those routines worked initially, they're not going to work forever because they wear down the skin barrier. So they have to transition off such harsh skincare sooner rather than later. And so you have to have a really good plan on how to do that. So within my course, I kind of take into account your previous routine and how to gradually reduce certain active ingredients. So let's say if you really used a lot of actives, I ask you to, okay, just focus on two that you think are most helpful. If you just use two, okay, let us just keep one. I usually ideally just like to keep one active ingredient that is like actively reducing inflammation, if usually that's the issue really for people with acne. And so this can be like, various different ingredients, and people, depending on their acne type, their skin condition, whether it's oily, dry, the congestion level, etc., we are going to pick that single ingredient or like a product, and then we're going to stick to that alongside like a very gentle, let's say, cleanse and moisturize routine. So this routine, the meaning behind it is to allow your skin, again, the space and time to repair itself, but also do something proactively to reduce that inflammation and keep acne in check in a gentler manner that isn't so overwhelming to the skin barrier. And this usually definitely works if you're also working on your quote unquote internal triggers, you're balancing your hormones, you're working on your healthy daily habits, nutrition, all of the other stuff.
Okay. That makes sense. This episode is sponsored by Lovebird cereal. Lovebird grain-free cereal was founded by a father on a mission to clean up cereal with real food ingredients that help support gut health and have no fake stuff. Traditional cereal can be loaded with refined grains and refined sugar, along with a lot of fake ingredients. From the first to last ingredient, they are the best you'll find in cereal, starting with prebiotic fiber-rich cassava from small regenerative family farms as the first ingredient. Finally, a cereal you can confidently serve your family that also tastes great. I personally love seeing Lovebird on the shelves at my local Sprouts. Use code JessicaAsh for 10% off your order at lovebirdfoods.com. And going back to the PUFAs and the polyunsaturated fats and the needs for linoleic acid in the skin barrier, do you find that some people actually respond well to what would be typically considered like a PUFA oil? I know some of these oils can actually be very nourishing and calming to the skin.
Yes. So again, we know from research, and this was one of the initial papers I remember reading on like acne, that they have found acne patients actually to have linoleic acid deficiency, not like systemically in their body, but just like locally in their sebum. And to me, I think it kind of makes sense at a time. And so I tried to experiment with different oils that were rich in linoleic acid, such as hemp seed oil or grapeseed oil. And I personally had pretty good success. So by the time that I introduced them, I really only had more or less like comedonal acne that was left over. Like I had periods with like very painful cystic acne, but those were like luckily behind me at that point. And so these oils really healed my skin in this like last phase of healing where I really just struggled with that, comedones and congestion. It really did help me. And so I think from my personal experience, there is definitely something to that, because lack of linoleic acid in the sebum has shown to actually accelerate microcomedone formation, basically those like small clogged pores. And so I would say there's definitely healing potential in these oils. Some people, again, they're not going to process it well, and they're just going to like aggravate the acne no matter which oil it is. I've definitely seen those cases. For some other people like myself, we do see a lot of kind of benefits when it comes to acne, especially with certain oils that are of high quality. Let's say cold pressed, something like again grapeseed oil, hemp seed oil, sea buckthorn also works well for a lot of people. I think like black seed oil is also a really helpful one. So we want these oils to obviously be extracted in a good way, with these very fragile fatty acids preserved as much as possible, combined with antioxidants that are going to protect them both within the product but also when applied on the skin. So those will be, I think, situations where we do see some healing benefits from PUFAs. And so PUFA or like zero PUFA skincare is not a magic bullet for everybody. Again, I'm always happy, like nobody happier than me when somebody tells me tallow is working for me. Like literally, like I'm the happiest person, because when somebody is having a success with such simple natural skincare, that's all you need for the rest of your life. Like literally, you don't have to do anything else. Like amazing, but that's just unfortunately not the case for everybody. So and it's funny because a lot of times people will tell me like, oh, Sarah, can you just help me make my skin or like transition into natural skincare? I've tried so many times, but my skin just doesn't like oils, doesn't like tallow. Like, how can I make my skin like tallow? And then I go, I cannot make your skin do anything. Like I can just be there to guide you to find what your skin responds well to. And this is really, the difference there. So yeah, I think natural skincare will not work for everybody. And there was also something you mentioned earlier that I want to address that is very important. You mentioned how initially certain products can seem to work really well. And then after a time, it starts to kind of clog up the skin. The skin starts to be more acne prone. And this is so, so true, not just with tallow, but also with many other products, whether it be mainstream or natural skincare, whether it be like active ingredients, and also especially essential oils. So essential oils are very much like antibacterial, antiseptic. And so they will very quickly lower that inflammation. And so it will appear like they're working magic on your skin, but then they do over time inflame the skin barrier. So let's say in the first few weeks or so, you can see, oh my goodness, this is so working so well. But then after 3 months, your skin is going to start to get worse and you're not going to know why that started to happen. Like you're going to blame something else, right?
Yeah, I learned that the hard way. I know there was a period of time a while back, this was like 5 or 6 years ago, I was using skincare with essential oils in it, citrus oils. And I know that those are both like they have some type of photosensitive nature to them, but it was all of a sudden, my skin had always been very resilient to anything. Like I could literally just slap on coconut oil and it would be like, it's fine. And after I decided to get more fancy with my skincare. And after I used this product for a period of like 3 or 4 months, my skin has never been the same. It has always been very inflamed, red. I've needed to take great care in protecting my skin barrier. And I think there was a very severe damage that took place when I used that essential oil product. And it didn't happen right away. At first, it was like, oh, this is amazing, wonderful, whatever. And never again.
This
You learn the
is
hard way.
You have no idea how common this is, literally. This is so common. And as you said, like something was damaging your skin barrier and you have come to a point where your skin was so sensitive, it kind of really wasn't itself anymore. And so I have a lot of clients who have really come to this point where they start to react to almost every single skincare product they try because your skin barrier is already inflamed. The immune system is already on high alert. And so your skin barrier is, very leaky, very sensitive, very reactive. And you're literally going to react to products that you were able to use without any problem for years up to that point. So I have clients, some of them cannot really use even like the gentlest cleansers, moisturizers. I have clients who literally react to every single moisturizer they have tried. And so we really have to do no skincare for a while, just focus on diet lifestyle for a while because their skin barrier has been so inflamed over time that they have come to a point where they just cannot tolerate anything. So as your skin barrier heals, as it becomes more, functional, more robust, this is when you actually can tolerate more skincare. You can actually then see benefits from that skincare as well.
Okay. I'm curious, do you see that seasonal changes when the skin barrier is damaged? Do you see that people are a little less resilient to seasonal changes or environmental pollutants. How does that fit in? Because I think everybody in an ideal world would love to use natural skincare, but we don't necessarily live in a very natural environment. So I'm just curious, like, it if you have healthy skin, can you handle these environmental pollutants and these seasonal changes without a problem? Or do you still need to support your skin through those?
This is a really good question. So I would say, there's a lot of stuff and, so much about our modern world that really doesn't allow us to just, do nothing oftentimes. But yeah, I will come to that. So with the pollutants, obviously, if you live in a highly polluted area, there is a really high chance that all of that is impacting your skin in some way. Maybe it's raising the oxidative damage to your skin. And so some sort of, a plan, like a skincare plan that's going to protect your skin can be a very smart thing to do. Whether it's super necessary, maybe not. Usually, even with the best intentions, we end up damaging the skin. So for a lot of people, when I say to them, oh, just like skip morning exfoliation, for example, because you have literally just removed a lot of your skin barrier, and like you have removed the defenses that your skin has put up over the night so that it can face the harsh environment the next day. So you've just removed all that, right? So like just kind of like having a bit of a plan and understanding how the skin works, you can protect yourself against a lot of like the impact of those pollutants. So a strong skin barrier will kind of repel them, like especially from them entering your skin. But how necessary is to use skincare in that way? Again, probably beneficial if you are dealing with skin issues. I think there are like other things in our modern environment that are maybe more problematic, like the ever increasing toxic load is probably more of an issue because it really weakens your skin barrier from the inside via impact on your liver health, on your hormonal health, on so many other systems in your body. And so this also weakens the skin barrier because as you also pointed out yourself many times, the health and like the beauty of our skin is not the of utmost importance to our body when their body is in survival mode. And a lot of things in our environment, like, in our, let's say, environmental toxins, pollutants, things like that, can put our body in sort of like a stressed out state in a survival mode. And so it can start to break down your skin barrier just because your body doesn't really prioritize building this very healthy, robust skin barrier. So maybe in that way it will be more of an impact.
Okay, that's good to know, because I think so many people are focused on, oh my gosh, the sun, and oh my gosh, all these environmental pollutants, but not really focused on what's going on inside.
Yes. I think this internal part is very important, especially when it comes to skin barrier health. So it's obviously not just a topical part. There's definitely many ways in which we can damage our skin barrier topically, but in order for our skin barrier to heal, especially if you have history of damaging your skin barrier, like your skin does need a lot of nutrients, a lot of energy to, repair itself, which again just makes sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like it needs the energy to repair, but also to self-regulate. And it would make sense that if we didn't have that, the lipids in the skin would be imbalanced. The exfoliation would maybe be too slow. Like, it just makes sense that
Yes.
everything would be kind of conserving and slowing down to not repair at the correct pace. So that makes total sense. I'm curious about blue light too. That might just fit into the environmental pollutants. I know everyone's always so focused on the sun, and I'm curious. So, does blue light from screens affect the skin at all? Do you know anything about that?
Yes, so it definitely does, right?
Okay.
So with sunlight obviously contains like a whole spectrum. So there's red light, there's blue light in the sunlight, but they're kind of balanced out. So sunlight, there's definitely a healthy dose that our skin needs and craves in order to also regulate many of these processes in the skin. So for example, for a lot of people, also me in the past, I was always struggling more with acne in the wintertime than the summertime because the sun and proper sun exposure will regulate that inflammation in the skin. And, it can really kind of just like soothe that excess inflammation, and also regulates the maturation of these skin cells, keratinocytes, so they kind of like make sure that they are not sticking for too long on your skin and clogging up your pores, and instead shedding off your skin in a timely manner. So sunlight, very, very important when done, in the right dose, of course. But when it comes to blue light, yes, we do have some research that shows that it can introduce, again, oxidative damage to the skin, accelerate skin aging, worsen hyperpigmentation, things like that. I think there's obviously a trade-off. I live in our modern lives in front of computers. Especially, I think millennials, I don't know, like they look at their phone like 150 times per day or something like that, So obviously there is a trade-off there. If you want to be connected to your devices, it does impact the skin. But yeah, obviously there are ways to kind of like shield yourself a little bit from that. Spend as much time outside in the real, in nature, having just like gentle daily sunlight exposure. So I know the sun is very demonized in the recent years, especially with the rise of SPF and all the craze about that. So it's another thing. I think maybe both of us have gotten hate online for like even speaking something against the SPF, but
yeah, it's one of those things. I'm wondering, do you have an approach, like a more nuanced approach with sunscreen or SPF? Obviously, from what you said before, I'm assuming that people that are going outside just constantly slathered in SPF are probably doing more harm than good, especially if they're struggling with skin issues. But then on the flip side, too much sun exposure can also increase aging. Is that true, or is that more of a
absolutely,
myth?
absolutely. I
Okay.
think there's kind of like a bell curve. Like if we do
Okay.
too little, obviously it's going to impact our health. Also, our skin will suffer if we don't have enough vitamin A, if we aren't making any nitric oxide, if we aren't regulating the hormonal systems that kind of depend upon proper sunlight exposure. But obviously, when overdone, if you're like baking in the sun for hours on end, of course you're going to age your skin, of course you're going to damage your skin. And I think this is something that really kind of like gets lost in the world of social media, because usually it's all like black and white. So if I say we need sun exposure, oh, you're saying that means the more the better. Like, no, there is definitely limits. So if for somebody who lives in a pretty sunny area, of course, find a good mineral based sunscreen to wear a hat. When it comes to vitamin D production, and we kind of forget that our face is a very minor area on our body. So you're not going to generate enormous amount of vitamin D by just exposing your face. Like you do need bigger parts of your body to be exposed as well. So it's not as crucial whether you're going to expose your face or not. So if you're concerned about your face, okay, use your sunscreen, use your hat, no problem. For somebody who lives here in Norway, like I do, especially in the wintertime, like the UV index is 0 for 6 months. Like I see no no reason. So yeah, I think it has to be a bit more nuance surrounding that. Yeah.
You mean you're not donning on your gloves and your hat in the winter?
No, my goodness. I mean, yeah. I mean, and a lot of sunscreens are not as good in blocking UVA rays as they're blocking UVB rays. So a lot of their arguments go that, yes, you are, even in winter, you're exposed to UVA rays, which may be true, but then a lot of sunscreens are just really bad at filtering the UVA. So they're just basically preventing you from burning, like they're filtering the UVB rays. They're like much better at that. So
Okay,
it doesn't make that much sense, like with the UV index of 0 in the middle of winter here.
yeah, yeah. No, that is super interesting, super helpful, because I always wonder. I'm someone that, I mean, I will go outside, go on a little bit of a walk for 30 minutes, and I want my skin on my face to get sunlight, which I think a lot of people would be like, oh my gosh, you're in your 30s and you're doing that, oh my gosh, you're gonna age so fast. But I think for me it definitely keeps my skin healthier, and I've noticed that. But yeah, if I'm
Yes.
gonna go and bake all day, then I definitely don on
Yes.
some zinc based sunscreen.
It's a different story, and also the health of our skin barrier obviously is going to be a major factor in how your skin actually responds to the sun. So going back to PUFAs, maybe consumption of industrial seed oils, loading our cell membranes with these very easily oxidized fatty acids will make you more susceptible to sunburn and to sun damage. So it's not really just about the sun, the impact of the sun, but how your skin is responding to that sun. So I think it's kind of like just not talked about at all, really. Like there's no nuance there.
Yeah. 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 It's really like a holistic approach. It's not just isolated to the skin. Hmm. So, going to diet, I know that you work with a lot of women who are already very conscious of their diet, are already very interested in nutrition and health. Do you notice certain dietary triggers being a part of people's acne. I know that you have talked extensively about coffee being one of your triggers, and no matter how you've tried it again and again and again, no matter how you try it, it just seems to trigger you. You sent out a great email one time just talking about how, even if I have coffee in the pro-metabolic way, is it going to impact my acne? And it's kind of like we try to make everything very rule-based and very strict, but there's nuance to everything.
Yes.
So what are some common food triggers that you see?
So I'm going to address coffee first, and I can go to like the common triggers. So for me, since I had a history of kind of like bit extreme estrogen dominance, so on hormonal birth control, I used to have really very painful migraines. I had like a lot of other symptoms of estrogen dominance. So for me, I think coffee was really just adding to their problem. Like I couldn't tolerate even the smallest amount of like quality coffee. And like a lot of times it wasn't really that top quality a lot of the time. So I think maybe also that played a role. So I think, well, you will know this better than me, but in the liver, the waste estrogen and the caffeine are kind of like processed in the same pathway. So I think if we're already overwhelmed with the waste estrogen, like I was, you just cannot tolerate any extra caffeine. Then there's also other active substances in coffee, which could potentially, I guess, impact us, maybe dehydrate the skin. So I kind of like would always notice my skin being more dehydrated. So nowadays I can have it occasionally without any issue. Decaf is tiny bit better, not great. Whereas with green tea, matcha, things like that, I can have it much more frequently without problem. So there is something specific about coffee for me personally. I've definitely worked with a lot of clients who had no issue with coffee. For a lot of others, they did indeed have issue with coffee, but then they were able to reintroduce it once they resolved like other stressful triggers on their body. So I think the coffee really just can add to that overall stress that we are dealing with. That's, kind of stress response in the body. So if your cup is already overflowing, this just kind of like make it, that much worse. So I think, that's kind of like on the coffee question. I think it's a kind of like good to experiment a little bit for yourself and see where you stand, because it is a powerful substance, like it's not to be treated as lightly. So I think people like to just kind of like check off all the boxes, like, oh, I'm gonna now follow pro-metabolic, I'm just gonna do all the sourdough, orange juice, coffee, like whatever, and I'm gonna be it's gonna be fine. And then something doesn't work out quite as they thought, and that's like, oh, this whole thing is like horrible, right? No, it's not. Like, you just like, there is some bio individuality which we have to respect. So for the other triggers that I've observed, I think the biggest issue is actually lack of nutrients. I've oftentimes seen how lack of protein, lack of fat soluble vitamins, especially vitamin A, bioavailable vitamin A, how lack of those can really start to impact the skin. So protein obviously is so immensely important for, regulating blood sugar, for tissue repair, for hormonal health, for so many things. Again, you know this better than I do. And so I will oftentimes see just how adjusting the daily protein intake, especially for breakfast, can have such a positive impact on skin health and like how clear your skin is. And then with like vitamin A, for example, this is one of those very important nutrients that will regulate the cellular turnover in the skin. So your skin kind of like gets to be very sluggish in renewing itself. And so if the new skin cells are traveling very slowly to the surface, they're maturing not so optimally, also the dead skin cells that are on the surface are not going to be shedding off your skin when they're supposed to. Instead, they're going to be clogging up your skin. So a lot of the times, especially in like more, let's say vegan diets that obviously, will lack bioavailable retinol vitamin A, their skin can get so congested, like nothing really topical that is supposed to work on the congestion actually works. So they've tried like all the retinols or the exfoliants and nothing ever fixes that skin texture. It only gets fixed once they really start to get enough of vitamin A via diet. So this is like, I think, one of the most common things that I see. And again, especially because a lot of us have history with different medications that really deplete us, because we do need a lot of nutrients to like run things and like, to support hormonal health. And in today's world, we arguably have food that is maybe less nutritious than it was, 50, 70 years ago. Whereas actually our nutrient demands have maybe increased because of increased toxic load. There's chronic stress, there's this and that. And so it creates really this like unfavorable situation where, again, your liver is kind of like overwhelmed. You don't have enough nutrients to even support basic functions, and let alone beautiful glowing skin. So those would be, I think, like the top reasons. It's much less about certain foods. I know people like to demonize dairy. I have not seen that many issues with quality dairy, especially if we stick to things like butter, ghee, Parmesan cheese. Usually even people who react to other dairy, who are acne prone, can tolerate at least ghee. And it's actually very beneficial because of the fat-soluble vitamins that the skin loves. So some other triggers, I would not say that any actual ancestral food is a trigger. It's really just like these modern inventions. I like to call them like modern Franken foods, from industrial seed oils to emulsifiers, additives, all the stuff that we just like invented in the last 100 years that are the issue more so. So basically processed foods more so than really any ancestral foods. Again, now there's a trend of demonizing eggs and how they're so inflammatory. I mean, maybe for some, but not for, majority. So
Right. It's like the typical gluten, dairy, eggs,
yes,
animal
yeah, the
foods.
typical trio.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's super interesting. I'm glad you really hit on the nutrient aspect of it, because it's an important reminder over and over again. I love hearing how it really you've seen it impact the skin in your work, because it's true. It's like really it does come down to having the tools and resources our organs need to do their jobs. So it always goes back to that. And when we're so focused on restriction, we often miss out on what we actually need.
Yes. And I think that's why a lot of women have really healed with your pro-metabolic approach. I have so many clients come to me and say, I have like healed my relationship with food. I finally, see my health markers improve. I can finally feel like human again, basically, because we have lived in this restriction for so long, kind of like trying to whip our body into submission, trying to whip our skin into submission by trying to control it with like a 10-step routine, while at the same time you're trying excessive cardio to keep your weight down. You are like trying this restricted diet, like all the things you're supposed to do, and never really just nourishing yourself, providing really all the nutrients and energy that your body really needs. And so, as you say yourself so eloquently, always, like our body doesn't run on thin air. Like our skin cannot be glowing and healthy out of thin air. Like there has to be an input of energy and nutrients.
Absolutely. So, I mean, just wonderful information. I'm trying to think of a way for if women are sitting here saying like, okay, me, is there any specific things you're looking for when you are looking for a damaged skin barrier? So if some women are thinking, I think I might have a damaged skin barrier, but I'm not sure if that's me or not, what are some specific things to look for?
Really good question. So I would say your skin feeling kind of dehydrated and dry, even if you're applying a rich moisturizer, is one of the very common signs. So our skin is going to lose much more water from the skin, like through the skin, than optimal if your skin barrier is leaky and dysfunctional. So that is usually the case. A lot of people kind of just think that they need to find a better moisturizer. Like that's not a problem. You have to really repair your skin barrier. So that's like very common one. Also, some other people will have this dehydrated skin situation, but then their skin kind of gets oily throughout the day. So it's kind of like dry in the morning, oily throughout the day, because the skin is trying to put some extra layer of protection, on itself, like against the harsh environment, against further loss of water. So it's going to overproduce sebum throughout the day. So this is also a very, very common sign. Some other signs would be, it really makes it easy for me if I look at someone's skin history, which I always do with my clients, and I will see what skincare they have been using so far. And that I can almost always deduce, okay, this has actually been inflaming your skin barrier. This is why you're struggling with acne. This is why you're struggling with, periodermatitis or skin texture or like dull skin or whatever it might be. So I can usually tell from the skin history. now after almost a decade of like looking, different skin and like, working with people, I can sometimes even tell just by looking at someone's skin, but it oftentimes isn't as obvious. So people imagine that their skin barrier is going to, let's say, be damaged only if they see red, flaky, rashy skin, but that's really the most extreme case. A lot of people are not ever going to reach that stage. For a lot of people, they're going to exist in this stage where they think that, oh, my skin is just a bit naturally dry, or I'm just breaking out, I'm just acne prone, things like that. I just am purging, I'm going through this like purging phase. Like, no, you're just maybe irritating and inflaming your skin barrier. That is usually what's going on.
Okay, that's super helpful. I mean, I could talk to you about this stuff for hours, but I feel like it gives a great primer for people who have been doing trial and error with all their skincare and not really finding any success. That simpler is better. If somebody wants to work with you or learn more about this from you, where can they find you? Where can they get more Sara?
Oh, thank you so much. I could talk to you all day long. So they can find me. I'm Healthy Skin Glows on Instagram. My website is healthyskin-glows.com. So if you go to my website or my Instagram, you can easily find my free resource. So there is a free skincare course, and inside there, I put a few videos just explaining a lot of the concepts that we covered today as well, with the skin barrier, how we irritate the skin unknowingly, how we spread the inflammation around unknowingly, things like that. But I also made a PDF with just hundreds of different products, ingredients, and skincare practices that are irritating that we need to remove in order for the skin to heal. So when healing the skin barrier, you really cannot heal if you're doing something on a daily basis that is just irritating the skin. And this can be a small thing. This can just be, let's say, using a conjac sponge every single day or something like that, something, let's say, inconspicuous. So there's definitely a lot of ways, a lot of kind of like traps to fall into. So definitely go download that free resource to get you started. A lot of people have healed just by removing the stuff that they don't need, just by giving the skin the space and time to heal itself. Simple things would be just to really simplify your routine. Inside my course, I teach or like how to implement the minimal effective dose principle to skincare, which is basically the minimal dose you need to get the desired results. So for example, if you can have moisturized skin with minimal light moisturizer, don't use 3 hydrating serums. Like, why apply extra 200 ingredients if you don't need them? You're just disturbing your skin barrier and your skin microbiome, right? So we just want to really simplify wherever we can, even if you have amazing products. And actually, this is again going back to the beginning of our podcast, where we talked about how people get really pulled into these like very beautiful products. And a lot of my clients use really great products, amazing, chock full of beautiful ingredients, but it's just all too much when taken together, right? And this is where a lot of issues start. So, yeah.
Oh, super helpful. Well, you have so many resources. I love Sara's resources. You have a mini course, right? And then you have a book, and then your
Yes, go get the book. The book is like $5 on Amazon. It can teach you so much. Like, this is really distilled knowledge from like 10 years of
so much, just so much information that's so helpful and actionable and just straight to the point. I just love it because it's no BS. Like, there's just no like floof. There's not fluff.
Yes,
It's just,
I really wanted people to just like read it in one sitting and just implement the info straight away. Like that was my point. Like my point was not to make something that people are gonna like spend a week reading through, searching the research. Like, no, just like, actionable, no nonsense info that I think just really can resonate with people. So yeah, basically really just like distilled from so many years of, observing patterns in the real world and what works and what doesn't. So a lot of people really have gotten really great results just by following those very simple principles. And there's also a very simple routine to follow that is outlined in the ebook. So I think people can also just like start there. I think it's a really good starting point as well.
That's awesome. Well, I will include all those links below for anyone who's interested. Thank you so much for being here, Sara. I appreciate you so much. And
thank you
all your
so much, Jessica. It's been such an honor. Thank you so much.
If you're looking for any of the links or resources discussed today, they're included in the show notes, which are linked in the description box below. If you enjoyed the episode and want to support the podcast, please share about it with others, share about it on social media, or like this video and subscribe to the channel, or leave a review or rating on any of the major platforms. I really rely on amazing women like you in our community to spread the word, and I truly appreciate any bit of feedback that you give. If you want more content or you want to stay in the loop about new episode drops, follow me on Instagram at Jessica Ash Wellness, and sign up for my Sunday email at jessicaashwellness.com/email-subscribe. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you soon.